Welcome back to Music Mania after about 2.5 months or so since the last full episode. In the time since that episode, more than half of that time in fact, I was a little bit too busy to do this show at all, and I even forgot to do, some of my bi-weekly update stuff that I do on my main channel once and nearly twice in about that time period as well. Had some busy work stuff going on, but all of that is not a topic for this particular video. Following that little bit of busy period, I took a month off from doing content in general in June, and also took a little bit of a vacation even from work in June as well. Did both of those things. On the main channel, I posted one video that was basically just saying that I was going on hiatus for a little bit of time, and saying that I would be back on the main channel in July, which is going to happen. Tomorrow on July 1st will be my first video back on the main channel. But Music Mania here on the second channel, I had mentioned, at this point about 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, that I would be back in June, because I just didn't have time to work on stuff. At that point, I was thinking I would be back in early June. That was before I had decided to take a content hiatus in the first place throughout the entire month this month. But today is the last day of June, June 30th, so we technically are still back in June. And with some other pretty major life changes going on at this period of time as well, let's just say it's time to expand a little bit of the content that I'm doing. And that includes returning to Music Mania as my first video back after the hiatus. This episode 15, however, is not the start of going back to a weekly format. I've ultimately decided that I'm not going to be doing Music Mania weekly, at least for the, near-term future. There might be a time that I come around to doing that kind of thing at some point. It's not going to be right now, however. Instead of the weekly coverage like I was doing before, talking about all of the releases that I was personally aware of and had a chance to listen to and rating all of those on Music Board, I'm just going to go over my favorite releases of each given month and do those, on the Monday following the last Friday of any given month. So I talk about basically all the releases that come out in any given month, or I've had a chance to listen to all of them, and so can consolidate and, make a little list of my personal favorites. So this video will be the first one of those. You'll notice in the title, I had said my favorite music releases of Q2 of 2025. So basically all of April, May, and June, because I haven't done Music Mania for nearly the entirety of that space of time. So with all that being said, without further ado, without any further introduction to this video, today we talk about my favorite music of the quarter. Number 10 on this list is Within Destruction's Metal, which, from this starting point, you will see that the list is going to range from pretty weird to pretty normal to weird again, with, basically every other entry to the list. There's going to be some weird and maybe even controversial picks for the list. So to one degree or another, expect that. This is definitely the introduction of what I mean. I'm sorry in advance for all of that, but, it's my opinion, it's my enjoyment factor, it's my list for just these 3 months. Like I said, April, May, and June. This isn't for the whole year so far, it's just this quarter that I haven't been able to talk about. So anyway, Within Destruction has been doing some super fun and experimental stuff with their last few albums, and this is definitely the most experimental of their albums yet. And I'm pretty into it. I don't think this album is perfect. I don't think it's like the most phenomenal thing to ever release, but I think that the softer moments are good and the heavier moments are also really good as well. And the two vibes switching back and forth tend to mix and combine pretty well, pretty smoothly at most points. I get why some people aren't into this. I get why there's only a 2.5 or 2.7 out of 5-star rating on the album as a whole. But I can't say that I fully agree with that take, in as far as I enjoyed it a lot more than that. I don't think it's like right middle of the road. I think it's a solid like 3.5-star album. Maybe even 4, but definitely 3.5. So this is my number 10. My number 9 pick is Mountains of Madness by a band called Puterion or something like that. Not entirely sure how to pronounce that band name, so I apologize. I'd never heard of this artist before, but somebody had recommended this in a particular Discord server that I'm in. I was like, that looks kind of cool, and the Lovecraftian gimmick seems like it could be a fun one. And the general songwriting of the album I found to be pretty interesting and enjoyable. This seemed pretty Melodeath in a lot of ways, a lot of Melodeath inspired stuff, with some few other things kind of going on in the mix that I don't listen to a ton of. But this album was really good, kind of got me in a different mindset. It was unique, it was interesting, it was definitely not just the same old album that I've listened to 50,000 times like a lot of core music is. Don't get me wrong, I love core music, that's why I listen to a lot of it, but every once in a while you get something that's different, kind of like this, and I just really enjoy that. Really respected this album, and definitely think it deserves a shout out on this, grouping of my favorite albums of the quarter. So next up is going to be number 8 on my list, and that is I can't remember if this is a recent release or not, but it's one that I just barely listened to a couple of days ago. That is At the End of All Things by Giant's Knife, which is definitely one of the albums so far this year that has definitely its own unique touch within the realm of metal that it exists. It's pretty separate from essentially any of the other records that I've listened to so far this year. It's not like this is the most creative or boundary pushing, envelope pushing release of music out there. Like it's just not that, but its particular conglomeration of elements just kind of fused together in a way that feels more cohesive to me, and feels like it's more bolstering itself as an album rather than having a few songs that are really strong and several duds, which is what a lot of what I listened to over these past few months have been. There have been a lot of albums where there are like a couple of really great songs, but basically everything else is just not it. This album definitely breaks through, and the entire package from beginning to end is a really solid one to listen to beginning to end, so I recommend it for that. I really don't know what else to say about this beyond the fact that I think it will continue to grow on me through the rest of the year. It might even make a top 10 of the year. Might not be top 10, but you never know. It could happen. But now we're going to see the list get a little bit more controversial with number 7. That is going to be Ghost's new album, Skeleton. And I know there's a ton of metalheads, there will be the people that are just like, I love Ghosts, and the other people who really hate them. And let's be clear about this. The conversation about whether or not you consider Ghost metal or not doesn't matter. This is completely separate from that conversation. I enjoy Ghost to some degree, just as, a musical element is concerned. I basically never go out of my way to listen to them, but on road trips, if I'm ever riding with one of my brothers in particular, he'll often play Ghost on like road trips because it's good road trip music actually. And several of their albums are pretty good. I think their last couple of albums, Prequel and then whatever the 2022 one was called, both of those are solid with several really great songs. But I think that Skeleton actually tops both of those. It might for me anyway. I said the list was going to be controversial with a pick like this, but I don't really care. I think this album is really great. There are just a couple of songs on here that really don't land for me, but a ton of it is shockingly solid. In fact, I was actually going into this pretty reserved. I should clarify. I wasn't super excited to listen to the album because there was like one of the singles I listened to. I believe it was the second single that I listened to, and I was not into it basically at all. Definitely wasn't looking forward to the entire package. But I did reluctantly listen to it a couple of weeks after it released. Like I said, I don't mind Ghosts. I enjoy Ghosts for what they are, even if I don't actively seek them out very much. But it turned out being a really strong showing, basically most of the way through, just a couple of duds on there, but almost everything else is way solid. Number 6 is going to be something a little bit probably more popular of a pick within the people that might watch this video. That is going to be Heaven Shall Burn's new album, which is frankly really great. There's been a lot of hype about this band coming into the new album's release, and it certainly did not disappoint me at all. I found the general soundscape super interesting, sometimes tending towards some classic metalcore elements, but also very often sounding like Melodeath, which kind of surprised me a bit. A really, really great amalgamation of the genres, and just the general soundscape is something that I liked a lot. The general songwriting was something that I found myself being just super into, and the whole album is just full of solid songs that are like really, really enjoyable for me as far as my general tastes are concerned. Like I said, that kind of musical amalgamation that they formed with this was top notch. Only a handful of moments on the album, stuck out in a weird or odd way, but even those things I'll get used to in time. I will clarify that I think the disc 2 tracks here, the 4 bonus tracks at the end, they're kind of whatever. I could do without them, to be honest, but the main album, tracks 1 through 13 as its own package, are just splendid. They're really, really good. Enjoyed that a heck of a lot. Album number 5 on this list for the quarter is going to be another album that released alongside Heaven Shall Burn. That is Shadow of Intent with Imperium Delirium. So, really great. Determining whether this or Heaven Shall Burn was going to be, on top of the other was actually a pretty tough decision. They're both really solid in this, area of the list. I think in the end, I found the average bar of quality on Shadow of Intent's record to be slightly higher. And I also found Imperium Delirium to be really good after the relative disappointment that I thought that Elegy was. So this album arguably surprised me a lot more based off my expectations. I had pretty low expectations because of Elegy, and because I wasn't super into, I think, the 2 or 3 singles that I listened to. I thought one of them was pretty good, but the other 2 I was like, eh. But the whole album as a package is really great. Had a great time with it. Ben's vocals continue to be absolutely unreal, and the drums really get nuts at times as well. If you like Shadow of Intent to any degree, this feels a little bit more like what I like from them than the last album did for sure, and I would recommend it to anybody who enjoys core in any way, shape, or form. But number 4 is going to be a surprise listen for me. This was one that I just kind of saw recommended, I think, on a random Facebook group at one point. That is an album that is not found on here for some reason. What's going on with that? Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on. The full album version, the recent release version of Ruin's Eternal Lament isn't loading for whatever reason, so I'm just pulling up the EP from earlier in the year. Earlier in the year, Of Ruin released these 4 tracks as an EP called Eternal Lament, but just recently, this past quarter, they released a deluxe version of that, which included 4 more songs, which, makes it an entire album. So I'm only showcasing this here because, well, the other version isn't loading on Music Board for some really weird reason. But either way, really enjoyed Eternal Lament. It was one that I had missed earlier in the year. I hadn't listened to the original EP version. Like I said, I'm pretty sure somebody in a particular metalcore, deathcore fan group, a Facebook group that I'm part of, I'm pretty sure was how I saw this pretty shortly after it released. I listened to it. Didn't have any expectations going in one way or the other, but it really surprised me. Had a really great time with it. I think as far as its general soundscape is concerned, these guys definitely pulled it off way better than a lot of others that I've listened to earlier this year. You have other, deathcore releases from the year, things like Crown Magnetar's recent EP. That one left a lot to be desired for me personally. Of Ruin, in comparison, definitely really satisfied what I wanted to hear from this genre, so definitely a lot of respect for that. Number 3 on my list is going to be Nick Nocturnal's The Lost Chapters. If you follow the metal music content sphere to any degree, you know who Nick Nocturnal is, and you also know that he's recently gone on an indefinite hiatus, but he released this EP titled The Lost Chapters, basically alongside that hiatus announcement. And it's like the hardest EP of the year. I really, really like this a lot. I think it's my favorite EP of the year, broad scale. Features vocalists, as you can see, various classic vocalists from other artists within the genre, particularly people who were earlier in the genre. You have All That Remains with Phil, of course. You have Jonathan Vigil with The Ghost Inside, Barry Tomorrow. Just really great vocalists featuring on each song. And overall, the entire package is just like pretty much exactly what I wanted to hear this year from core. I'm not a huge I'm not a huge classic metalcore fan. I generally prefer more modern metalcore, but like this distillation of what the classic sound can offer was something that I was really super into and something that I was looking for at the time. It's very good. I think the choruses of the final song with Jonathan Vigil, some of those melodies don't really seem to fit, and I've found myself not particularly enjoying those choruses basically any time of the many times I've listened to this EP so far. But outside of that one little sticking point for me, I really, really enjoy this and have just found myself re-listening to it a lot. I think if you like OG metalcore, I'd argue that this EP is a must listen at this point in time. So yeah, congrats to Nick for deciding to take some time off and also releasing like the best EP of the year on top of that. So, number 2 is where we start to get a little bit more controversial once again. That is going to be Sleep Tokens, Even in Arcadia. And frankly, I don't care who's going to judge me for this pick. Kind of like what I said earlier with the Ghost album selection. I don't care about the discussion about whether Sleep Token is or isn't metal. I don't constrain myself to only listening to metal or anything like that. I listen to plenty of other stuff. It's just that the vast majority is metal and is more specifically core music. Even so, even in Arcadia, Sleep Token is a band that I came to really like after I fully experienced Take Me Back to Eden a couple of years ago, and the new album is really solid. It's definitely my favorite album of the quarter 2 of this year so far, without basically any exception. I don't think there's any other one that comes close to this as far as my favorite album of this quarter goes, and Whitechapel's album would definitely be my favorite album of the first quarter of the year. I reviewed this thing in full in the middle of May on this channel as well, so if you want to hear my detailed thoughts on the album, you have that video to check out if you would like to. I had a great time writing that one, but needless to say, I think Even in Arcadia is pretty awesome. You know, after everything I've said, that probably makes a lot of sense to you. There are definitely a small handful of decisions on here that I don't love, but even Take Me Back to Eden has a small handful of decisions that I don't love, or things that I've, not been as warm to in the recent months as I used to be a couple years ago, whatever the case may be. But as far as like sing-along worthy choruses and melodies and stuff are concerned for playing in my car whenever I'm driving places, Sleep Token is really great for that. Really like Take Me Back to Eden for that, and I also really, really like Even in Arcadia for that. Tons of catchy choruses, tons of catchy melodies that just never leave my head, basically. So this thing has got some bangers. I absolutely love it. Sue me. But you may have noticed, this is the number 2 selection for the quarter, but I also said it was my favorite album of quarter 2, and I also said that Nick Nocturnal released maybe the best EP of the year, not just of quarter 2. So what in the world could be number 1, you might ask? Well, that is the OST for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This is the number 1 pick for the year. Even though it's technically cheating, it's like 150 tracks, it's 8 hours long. I haven't even listened to the full thing yet. Like, I've been able to chip away at different portions of it, but I'm only a few hours into the soundtrack. But as far as playing the game right now, I'm in the middle of playing the game and listening to the soundtrack on its own, and this music is just special. I'm not huge on listening to OSTs as OSTs. I think generally that's more like tacky's not the right word, but I think the people that do that a lot, I just don't really get it. I'm not super into just listening to OSTs because I can, whether for film or for video games. It's not really my style. But in the sense that I very rarely, if ever, listen to OSTs just because I can, I think Lorien to start here has changed my mind on the matter, or has definitely begun to change my mind on that matter, because not only is the game absolutely phenomenal, and not only is the soundtrack unbelievably good, would you believe that these 8 hours of music on the soundtrack were composed by a guy who has never composed professionally before, has never studied music theory, and has never studied music composition at all in his life? Yeah, it's pretty crazy. If you want a little bit more information about how the soundtrack and how the game broadly was made, Skillup on his channel did a pretty like semi-documentary type thing that was nearly 2 hours long on how this game ended up getting made. It's like the craziest story. I don't understand how this game and how this music got made, but the game's great, and the music especially maybe my favorite thing of the year at this point, and I haven't even listened to all of it yet. So that kind of goes to show just how special I think it is. Anyway, like I kind of said earlier, it might be cheating a little bit to include this OST on the list as all the other stuff, not least because it's 8 hours long, not least because, it's an entirely different type of package than what you would expect from any given album or whatever. OSTs are inherently constructed differently than music albums tend to be, but like I was kind of saying, it's my list and I'll do what I want with it. And you know what I said about Sleep Token in the last entry about how there's a whole bunch of melodies and stuff that get stuck in my head like crazy. This OST has a lot of those as well, being the only thing to rival how catchy some of the melodies are. I've had songs of this stuck in my head for literal days on end with the impossibility of getting them out of my head, and I've never had that kind of thing happen with an OST before. It is absolutely insane how good this is, and I definitely recommend listening to some of the bangers on this. Like the first disc, Alicia, Gustave, Lumiere, these first 3 songs, you could just listen to those and like you have a very solid idea of what makes this OST as a whole so special. So I definitely recommend giving that a shot if you're somebody interested in any of that. It's really, really great music. But with all that being said, that is going to be the end of this video. I know it's a long one, but I kind of wanted to go through that whole, favorites of the year. Not the year, I specifically said that earlier. It's just of the last 3 months, and kind of get back into the Music Mania mode and adjust my sights of what Music Mania is on this channel at this point. Next time you're going to see this show on here is going to be on July 28th. It's the Monday following the final Friday of this month, where I'll go over some of my favorite albums and EPs of July. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video if you did. In the meantime, between now and, right about a month from now, I do have plenty of gaming and film-related content coming out on this channel, including this Wednesday when I do a little bit of a comparison video, not like showcasing the comparisons, but just reviewing the new How to Train Your Dragon live-action remake, and then talk about it in accordance with the original animated version. Really looking forward to that video, and I hope you're excited to see it as well. Like I said, thank you once again for watching if you did. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.